The Democrats' bill in the Senate to avert the sequester, as we now know, failed today. The plan was referred to ad nauseum by the Democrats and the administration as a, quote, balanced approach to solve the sequester problem because it offset the cost with a mix of both spending cuts and new revenue. The White House plan, which Republicans repeatedly said did not exist, even though it did, included $1.8 trillion in new deficit reduction. It found most of its revenue from closing tax loopholes for top wage earners. It also went nowhere fast. But amidst these dire times of fiscal constraint, a nation continues to turn its lonely eyes to potential sources of revenue that will not hit the paycheck of Americans' workers who have seen their wages stagnate. Enter Senators Tom Harkin and Sheldon Whitehouse of Iowa and Rhode Island, respectively, along with Congressman Pete DeFazio of Oregon. The three Democrats held a press conference today on Capitol Hill to discuss an idea to raise $352 billion over 10 years, and almost no one showed up. Seriously. My colleague George Zornick of The Nation was in the room. He says there were 6 or 7 reporters there. I don't have a cutaway shot of the reporters from that press conference, but that's 6 or 7 compared to this. Here's what the same room looked like during the Democrats' press conference on the sequester this afternoon. Dozens of reporters. It's a standing room only crowd for a bill that everyone knew was dead on arrival. So, what is this great idea that these three Democrats have, and why is no one listening to it? The bill from Senators Harkin and Sheldon Whitehouse and Congressman DeFazio would place a small tax of 3 basis points on most non-consumer financial trades. Or, in plain English, a tax of 3 pennies on every $100 traded in the markets. That's just $1.50 on a $5,000 trade. Again, according to the Joint Committee on Taxation, this modest tax would raise $352 billion over 10 years and would have virtually no impact on most Americans. Creates revenue while adhering to the most cardinal and sacrosanct rule of taxation. It taxes something we want less of, much like tobacco and alcohol taxes. This is right out of Econ 101, because the thing we don't want that this targets is Wall Street speculation. As George Zornick writes, it would apply to traded stocks and bonds, derivative contracts, options, puts, forward contracts, swaps, and other complex Wall Street instruments. It would not cover the initial issuance of any stock or bonds, nor covers or loans in the form of stock. This transaction tax would most notably impact high-frequency traders, and this is a feature, not a bug. High-speed trading presents a real threat to the economic system and would theoretically be slowed if the bill is passed. What's more, high-frequency trading produces no net social value. Coming up with an algorithm that can make a purchase a nanosecond faster than your competitor is good for one thing and one thing only: increasing profits for your investment bank. It does not further the goal of the efficient allocation of capital. I mentioned alcohol taxes because high-frequency trading is the Wall Street version of spending all day, every day, chugging 40s. Here's how Congressman DeFazio put it at today's presser, and apologies because there is only one video of this press conference, and it has bad audio, which is why you're about to see subtitles.
We have here a proposal that would both raise revenue and bring more stability to the financial markets, favoring long-term value investors, those who want to build an economy. We need to put people back to work. We need to rebuild our real economy. And at the same time, while we're doing that and making those investments, we have to figure out how to deal with our growing burden of debt.
This idea is such a good one that 11 European countries have announced plans to implement the same kind of tax at the beginning of next year. The Eurozone version called for 10 cents on every $100, way more than the one these three Democrats proposed today. The same idea was introduced during the legislative sessions of the 2 previous Congresses, but as both Congressman DeFazio and Senator Harkin noted today, in the past, former Treasury Secretary Tim Geithner was completely against this idea. However, they seem to sense some hope with the new guy, newly sworn-in Treasury Secretary Jack Lew.
So then I talked with Mr. Lew about the transaction tax, and he said, well, I can't put words in his mouth, but he didn't say no, or he didn't. I mean, he wasn't saying no like Mr. Geithner was. He was saying that he was basically open to looking at it and to engaging in further discussions on it.
So finally, there's a bit of an opening on this idea. He didn't say no like the last guy did. So you're saying there's a chance. And the Europeans are doing it. The bill has a total of 20 House co-sponsors and 3 in the Senate. And the conservative argument against it is the same as always. We don't need new revenue, only cuts. A piece today from the Heritage Foundation stated this country has a deficit and debt crisis because Washington spends too much, not because it taxes too little. Congress needs to focus on cutting spending, not unnecessary and economically damaging tax hikes. And taxes can play two roles in policy: raising revenue to fund the government, which is important, and disincentivizing destructive behavior and expensive externalities. This does both. And the truth is, Wall Street can afford it. Of course, all the logic in the world is merely a slingshot in David's hands against the Capitol Hill Goliath that is the financial services industry. Goliath, of course, did ultimately fall.